Beyond the buzzer, inside the game, this is Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
Another great show coming up for you here on this Wednesday. We're going to talk a little Ohio State Buckeyes here in a moment. We've got Stefan Krajisnik from Cleveland.com to talk Ohio State. One question I do want to ask him about Ryan Day. He now has the national title in his pocket. Does that change anything? Because, man, Ohio State, those fans there, they want a title every year. So we'll talk about them, how things are going here in the next year in 2026 for the Buckeyes. Also, a bit later, we'll talk with Cole Shelton, heavy.com, little NFL talk, kind of what he has seen. Buffalo Bills will be one team I'm really intrigued about, and we'll ask him about that coming up. Let's get to his couple of headlines for you. Obviously, first round of the NBA draft Tuesday night, pretty boring after really overall. I mean, there were no major trades, no huge surprises. First 5 picks kind of went chalk. A.J. DeBonsa going number 1 to Washington. Darren Peterson, number 2 to Utah. Number 3 pick was Cam Boozer to Memphis. The Bulls and going with Caleb Wilson of UNC at number 4. 5th pick going to the LA Clippers. They took Illinois freshman Keaton Wagler. There was some concern going in. Maybe Darius Acuff jumps in. Maybe Mikael Brown Jr. from Louisville, but that wasn't the case. Wagler goes to the Clippers. In fact, the first 8 picks were freshmen. Some were wondering if we would see for the first time an NBA draft where the top 10 were all freshmen. But leave it to Dallas to screw up history. The Mavs, who hired Michigan head coach Dusty May on Monday, took May's former player, Merez Johnson, the power forward, at number 9 to pair with Cooper Flagg and run the break. As that, I'd love to see these two together. I'm really curious to see how they're going to play together. Johnson has a motor like nobody's business. In all, 14 freshmen going in the first round, including Dallas taking Arizona freshman Koa Pete, who dropped all the way down to number 30. Pete not expected to stay in Dallas. He is headed to Phoenix. Memphis engineering a couple of trades and netted them 5 future second-round picks and the number 21 pick. That's where they selected Mexico's Kareem Lopez. He's a 7-foot center, the first player who didn't play college basketball last season to be selected in the first round, making it the longest wait for a non-college player since 1994, when Boston selected Andrei Fetisov at number 36. Tonight, the second round taking place. Some interesting names still out there. The center from UNC, Duke sniper Isaiah Evans still out there. His teammate Malik Brown as well. Arkansas's Malik Thomas didn't go in the first round. A couple of Big Ten seniors still waiting. Braden Smith, the point guard from Purdue, the all-time NCAA assist leader, and 4-year starter Bruce Thornton of Ohio State. Other NBA news, Portland finally finding a new coach, agreeing to a deal with Minnesota Timberwolves assistant Micah Nori. Nori, who is signing on under a unique contract that features only one guaranteed year, according to the Athletics. He'll coach this season, 2026-27. The Blazers will then have 2 team options for the following 2 seasons in 27-28, 28-29. The financial terms of the deal have not been reported, but early reports in the process indicate that the Blazers were offering far below the typical market average for an NBA head coach. And look, here's the thing. I hope this guy does really well, earns a fat contract, but we have been through this so many times before. If you don't want to pay for a head coach, it's not going to go well usually for you. Remember, years ago, Steve Kerr talked first to the Knicks when he was an analyst with Turner. The Knicks balked at the money that he wanted. The Warriors said, no, we'll pay that. And the rest is history. Warriors have 4 titles under Kerr, and the Knicks have just the 1 this year.
Time now for a moment of awe and a shout out to the Big Ten. The proud conference has taken a backseat to the SEC for much of the past couple of decades, but it's a league that is back. The last 3 national football champions in Michigan, Ohio State, and yes, Indiana of all teams. The first Heisman Trophy winner in 19 years. The men's basketball champion in Michigan, the first Big Ten champ since Michigan State 26 years ago. The women's basketball champion in UCLA, the league's first since 1999. And now, 5 lottery picks in the NBA draft. The first time the Big Ten has done that this century. Consider this, the conference had a total of 10 lottery picks in the 12 years between 2001 and 2012. Well, Tuesday night, they had 5. 1 more than the Big 12 and 2 more than the ACC. New TV money, NIL dollars, it's all made a different game in major college sports. In the Big Ten right now, the new kings of the hill, and they get our moment of awe.
You're listening to Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
Welcome back here to the show on Sports IQ with Larry Smith. Stefan Krajisnik is a beat writer with the Cleveland.com talking about Ohio State football, all things Big Ten. Hey, Stefan, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back on.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, let's just first talk about, the Ohio State, one of the great brands in all of college sports. What have we learned about this team here this spring and heading into the offseason?
Yeah, it was a pretty important spring for Ohio State just because, this was kind of the first offseason where we saw the transfer portal pretty heavily impact the way this roster looked. So between, the moves they made in the transfer portal and what they brought in, from their 5th ranked high school recruiting class, there's a lot of new faces around Ohio State. I think Ryan Day said it was 51 new guys joining the roster, this offseason, right? So a big thing was just kind of learning who these guys are, how they fit, what their play style looks like, with what Ohio State's coaching staff is trying to do and vice versa. And, we learned a lot about some of the new guys and kind of who can help fill out a depth chart, who can help make an impact, whether it be, a veteran that they got from the transfer portal or, a signee that they got from their high school class. So it's no surprise to know that, Ohio State, believes and firmly thinks that they can be a national title contender again this year. And they're going to be, right. They have a roster that's loaded with talent, even though it's some new talent, but they return, some big pieces like Jeremiah Smith, Julian Sayin, Jalen McClain at safety, Peyton Pierce at linebacker. There's a lot of guys who are familiar faces, around this building to kind of pair with some of those new guys. And you have a roster that's, ready to be among the best in college football, even though it's, put together maybe a different way than what we've seen at Ohio State traditionally.
You mentioned Jeremiah Smith. Is there any way he can get better than what he already is?
If you had asked me that his freshman year, I would have said no. And then he got better as a sophomore. And if you ask me again going into his junior year, you think it's almost impossible. But, there's always room for improvement. I think one of the, big things when you kind of look at his game last year and the game that they lost against Miami, his blocking is one thing that probably he feels he needs to improve on. It ended up being pretty costly to their season. But if that's the biggest flaw you have in a receiver that does everything else right, you're in a pretty good spot. So I'm interested to see mostly, how Ohio State moves them around. Last year it kind of felt like, their starting receivers. It was like, okay, these are your 2 outside guys. This is your slot guy. This is how it's going to go. I think with this year's roster, they have, 2 or 3 receivers that are kind of interchangeable between lining up on the inside, lining up on the outside where they want to fit. So maybe it's less about Jeremiah's skill and more so about the way Ohio State can use him and move him around and find ways to help Jeremiah Smith get open, because it's no secret that teams like Texas and Oregon and Indiana and these other teams that are on Ohio State's schedule, they're going to look Jeremiah Smith's way a lot. They're going to put a lot of defenders toward him and try to, take him out of the game as best as they can. Well, if you can counter that by moving Jeremiah Smith around and the defense has no idea where he's going to be on any given snap, I think it's interesting. They did it with Marvin Harrison Jr. just a few years ago, right? When teams knew they had to attack him and slow him down, and Ohio State moved him around and you saw him in the slot a little bit and become kind of an impact player in different areas on the field. I think you're going to see some of that with Jeremiah Smith this year too. And the way they kind of built that receiving core together, I think kind of helps do that just because of some of the versatility you have with the guys that are going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the quarterback, Julian Sayin, it's such a great first year as a starter. What improvements is he trying to make here in his second season under center?
Well, I think experience is obviously the biggest thing with him. We saw, whether it be in the Big Ten championship loss to Indiana or the Cotton Bowl loss to Miami, the quarterback on the other side was much more experienced than Julian Sayin, right? And talking about Carson Beck and Fernando Mendoza, Ohio State kind of seems to be an anomaly almost. Maybe Texas would be the lone exception where they're getting a quarterback that they recruited, highly touted recruit, they developed. He steps in as a starter, whereas, so many of these top teams are going out and getting transfers. I'm not saying that either way is right or wrong, but Ohio State with Julian Sayin is still kind of along the more traditional approach of this guy came in. Yes, he started at Alabama, but he was there, 2 weeks before Nick Saban retired, and then he entered the transfer portal. Comes to Ohio State, learns as a freshman from Ryan Day and from Will Howard and kind of sits behind the scenes and then steps in as a starter last year. Now what's the next step? What did he learn last year? What did he see? The defenses that he faces in 2026, he's going to have seen before and learn from it. So I think that's the biggest thing with him is just been there, done that, a little bit of an approach. And then the mobility. I think that was one thing that, he kind of lacked last year, and Ryan Day, talked about it many, many times in the spring of just like his legs have to be an X factor. His legs have to be an X factor. He's not going to, run around like a Lamar Jackson or anything like that. That's not on the horizon for Julian Sayin. But, we saw late last year in that playoff, Carson Beck, buy a play, right? It's 3rd and 7, and he scrambles and gets you 8 yards and gets you that first down when the defense least expects it. So just little things like that, where if Julian Sayin finishes a game with 10 rushing yards, that might be the difference between 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 4 on any given play. And so that's a big thing for him, is the mobility and the experience. Those two things together could make him an even better quarterback this year.
Yeah, no question at all. Talking to Stefan Krajisnik, he's with Cleveland.com, talking Ohio State Buckeyes. You mentioned Ryan Day. He now is a year removed from that elusive national championship. Does that make things easier for him in Columbus or more difficult?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think, going into the 2025 season, there was definitely kind of a weight off the shoulders. Like there wasn't pressure, like you have to do this because you're coming off a national championship. And, he even joked about that. Like, yeah, being the Ohio State coach is never easy, but there is a little bit of, less pressure, I think, when you're coming off a national championship. But there's also so much that comes with, winning a national championship, whether it be the media circus or, players being asked to do this, being asked to do that, and the mental side of, you don't want the championship hangover. Like there is, I think, an element of, you have a lot of guys returning that, played a big role in 2025, but weren't necessarily, starters during the 2024 season. So they don't necessarily view, themselves as like these guys who made a big impact on a national championship team. A guy like, I'm thinking like Peyton Pierce, he's going to be a starting linebacker for them this year. He was their 3rd linebacker last year. A couple of years ago, he didn't really have much of a role on this team outside of special teams. So for him, it's, I have a championship ring from being part of that 2024 team, but there's a sour taste of like, hey, I'm started now. Like I want to be the guy who wins the national championship at Ohio State. So in terms of, motivation and hunger, I think it's probably a little bit easier to do it this year as opposed to last year, where you had a decent amount of guys coming back who were starters on a national championship winning team.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. You mentioned, of course, Indiana, the defending national champs. I still have a hard time saying that. I don't know if I'll ever say that with a straight face and not without pausing. That just doesn't, never thought in my lifetime I would hear that. But Indiana football, national champions, does that, Michigan, of course, is the big rivalry, will always be the Michigan game. But does that Indiana game, all of a sudden, considering these two meeting the last 2 seasons and the last 2 national champions, how big is that game now for the Buckeyes?
You said it there, right? Nothing will ever replace the Michigan game, and nor does anyone, want to argue that or vouch for that, whatever, however you want to say it. But,
yeah,
throughout Ohio State's history, there has been, kind of these mini rivalries that form, right? Of just stretches where, Ohio State has been kind of the face of consistency for the better part of 50 years. But along the way, there's been, programs that have come along and tried to challenge Ohio State. You think back to, those the peak Dabo Swinney years at Clemson and the battles that Justin Fields had with those Clemson teams and kind of the mini rivalry that formed there. When Oregon came to Ohio Stadium in 2021 and beat Ohio State, and then in 2024 Ohio State goes to Eugene and loses again to Oregon, and a mini rivalry starts to form there because those two, Dan Lanning and Ryan Day, are going head to head on the recruiting trail, and then they meet again in the 2024 season in the Rose Bowl, and Ohio State kind of beats the crap out of them. And, you have a little bit of a rivalry that forms there, right? And maybe Indiana's kind of the next step in that, right? Just kind of a nothing near the Michigan rivalry, but a mini rivalry that forms. Obviously, these are programs that know each other. Before, we went away with the divisions in the Big Ten, they were facing each other, every year. And the last time Indiana had won a game was back in the 80s, right? So that's a lot of losses, and that's an easy way for a rivalry to kind of get forgotten just because it's so lopsided. Think about some of the other ones throughout like Alabama, Mississippi State. They play each other every year. Those are the 2 closest SEC schools to each other geographically, but it doesn't feel like there's much of a rivalry because Alabama just wins every year. And Ohio State, Indiana was kind of like that, right? And this maybe with Indiana doing what they're doing and beating Ohio State, Curt Cignetti and Ryan Day, they're 1-1 against each other now, and they're going to meet again October 17th in one of the biggest games of this college football regular season, if not the biggest game, right? So there's definitely a little something there. And I think, Cignetti, the confidence he exudes and the way he talks, I think, definitely ruffles some feathers. And he's backed up everything he said. There's no denying that. And people at Ohio State wouldn't deny that either. But I think it adds kind of to the emotions of everything. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's, some fired up players that lost to Indiana last year, going into Memorial Stadium this year and being, motivated more so than you would be normally for an Ohio State Indiana matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big stories earlier this month, of course, was the Brendan Sorsby case. One time played at Indiana, and one time as a player bet on his team at Indiana. Went to Texas Tech. The whole thing in terms of that he was given a preliminary injunction that's gone away now. He's going to go to the NFL supplemental draft. But the Big Ten was getting together to discuss boycotts and that kind of thing. What light can you shed on that with conversations that you may have heard?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that people at Ohio State were not happy with how, Texas Tech handled that situation. And, I think we saw, the Texas Tech wound up, maybe it was Texas Tech, maybe it was Brendan Sorsby, who knows. Ultimately, the right decision was made in terms of him going to the NFL supplemental draft and not playing for Texas Tech this year. But maybe like a few hours before that news broke, Michigan had come out and said that they were going to cancel or boycott games scheduled against Texas Tech. You mentioned, the Big Ten having some meetings about it. Nebraska was, kind of publicly out there voicing its displeasure with what was happening, at Texas Tech. And, Ohio State, I guess, never wound up publicly having to say anything. I don't think they had any competitions outside of maybe some of those, like tournaments, like, track or golf or whatever it may be. They didn't really have anything scheduled with Texas Tech to maybe feel the need to say something publicly. But where I think folks at Ohio State, and I'm sure around the country, people would agree is that, number one, the way Texas Tech was handling the Brendan Sorsby situation and even thinking about letting him play was bad to begin with. But number two, it was kind of a microcosm of what's been the big issue in college sports, right? Is that if you don't get your way, you have a local judge, give you a ruling that helps you and you move on with that, right? And it's we get surprised when a player like Trinidad Chambliss gets approval from a judge in Mississippi to get another year of eligibility. We get surprised if, someone sues and gets more money in NIL that they feel like they could get. But if you can go to a judge and get approval on this, right, the most obvious rule in sports, whether you want to go back to, the White Sox in the early 1900s, or you want to go to Pete Rose, whatever, or the NBA as recently as, a couple of years ago or last year, whatever it was, like this is the one rule that everyone agrees on in sports. And even that a judge could look the other way and make a ruling that lets a guy play. And that's kind of just like okay, if that's where we are in college sports, that's not a good place to be, because this is obvious. And even that's being handled the wrong way by a local judge, just making a decision to help out, a school in Lubbock. So that's where I think Ohio State and other folks kind of looked at this and were like, man, we're in a bad spot if even that can get passed and can get, looked the other way. So it's college sports in an interesting spot. Ohio State's obviously a leader in terms of its voice with Ross Bjork, the athletic director, Ryan Day, the head football coach, and so on and so forth. Ohio State knows it has a voice and how things are going to get fixed. And it's not easy. I don't envy that job in terms of having to make those decisions. And we'll see what happens as, college sports continues to move along.
Yeah, great point. I call it the final fig leaf. Everything else has been stripped away, like you said. If you don't like this judge's decision, then go to another judge. But this is kind of the final piece. And I think you're right. If somehow this veil was broken, if this was punctured, it had long-term ramifications. Do you feel that sports, college sports, administrators, legislators, the NCAA, could this maybe be a turning point where they learned that we have to find a way to not only set our rules, but make sure everyone adheres by them? We have that right to have laws within our organization and within conferences.
And that's up to the schools to decide, man. Like that's the irritating part of this. And I wrote about it on our site, cleveland.com, a few weeks back, where the Brendan Sorsby situation is tough and everyone's in agreement, but how would you handle it if it was your school? Like talking to athletic directors and coaches, right? If this happened at Ohio State, or if it happened at Florida State, or if it happened at Cal, and this happened to your star quarterback, like how would you handle it? Would you do the same thing that Texas Tech did? Because that's the problem. We see it, now, whether it be with the House settlement passing last year, and all these schools agreed on the House settlement, and here we are a year later being confused why these rules are being enforced or wanting to change them. Right. All these, we see it now with these, Big Ten and SEC, spring meetings. It's like, oh, these schools are considering breaking away since the NCAA can't enforce anything, the SEC is going to have self-governance and the Big Ten is going to have self-governance. Like, can you have self-governance if no one wants to be governed, though? Like, you have to want to be governed, because the moment it happens at Georgia, guess what? Georgia's going to a local judge. The moment it happens at Ole Miss or Ohio State or Indiana, like, all these schools are doing the same thing. They're pointing fingers, and then when it happens to them, they do the same thing. So if you want to be governed, then you can be governed. Like, these things can work. The problem is no one seems to want to be governed right now. And I don't know if self-governance is going to help that. I have my doubts, because okay, if something happens to a Big Ten school, you're going to tell me the Big Ten is going to enforce some rule and not let that school go to the college football playoff. Like, I struggle to see it. If schools don't want to be governed, then it's up to them. Like, the ball's in your court. You had the House settlement. You're already twisting the rules and trying to change that. And it's like you all agreed on this, and you all said that this was going to be a part of the solution. And here we are a year later, and it's like, well, my player's not getting paid the money he got paid. Yeah, because you have a donor just pumping the money to him. You agreed that, like, we wouldn't do that. So it's you kind of have to look in the mirror, I think, if you're these schools, and be like, we're all trying to find the guy who did this, and it's you. Like, you're the guys who did this.
Yeah, look in the mirror. Exactly. I can't say it any better. Stefan, always great to have your insights, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on again.
All right, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Stefan Krajisnik once again with the Cleveland.com, talking Ohio State, little Big Ten football, college football as well. We'll look forward to talking with him again as we get closer to the season, and if he can squeeze us into what's good. All right, more Sports IQ coming up after this.
If you're a diabetic, we have great news. You can end the painful finger sticks with a new CGM. Plus, they may be covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance. If you test and inject daily, you may qualify. Call US Med now to learn more.
800-390-5160. 800-390-5160. 800-390-5160. That's 800-390-5160.
Let's continue now with some news from the Diamond. A few players having some big months in June. Last night, the Royals took down the Rays 14-5. A former Florida big man on campus, Jack Caglione, leading the way with a pair of homers and 3 RBI. For the month of June, he is really heating up, hitting a very robust 357, 7 big flies, 16 RBIs. The Cubs dumped the Mets last night, 9-8 at Citi Field. The Cubs' Pete Crow Armstrong on a tear. He had a homer and 3 ribbies yesterday. For June, he's hitting, are you sitting down? Pete Crow Armstrong hitting .437 for the month of June with 9 homers, 14 runs batted in. The Dodgers' Shohei Ohtani has been strong on the mound all season. His bat finally heating up in June. For the month, he's hitting .333, 7 homers, 14 RBI. Let's not forget about the A's. Nick Kurtz in the month of June, 9 homers, 20 runs driven in, also a batting average of .280. So a few of the guys who are really heating up here in June as we get into the meat of the season. Excited to watch what they're doing. College football, the big story, kind of that got eclipsed by the fallout from Dusty May in Michigan, and of course the NBA draft here. But college football taking another stab at what eligibility looks like. The NCAA voting one of its most significant eligibility changes ever on Tuesday. And here's the deal. Under the new rules, players will be granted 5 years of eligibility to be completed within 5 years of high school graduation or an athlete's 19th birthday, whichever comes first. There will be limited exceptions for factors like religious missions, maternity leave, and military service, things like that. In effect, the new rule eliminates red shirts across college sports. Under the previous system, athletes had 5 years to compete over 4 years. There would not be further waivers for injury or other extenuating circumstances. So excited about this for college sports. This really kind of streamlines things. You're not going to have a player now playing in 8th or 9th year. If you have injuries, it just is what it is, and you move on at some point. So happy about that on the surface. Let's see again if who's going to challenge this in court, because that's just where we are. We're going to find a way to hire a lawyer and bring in people to keep playing. So we'll see where it goes. And then there is Brendan Sorsby, another turn in that case. The NFL. Now remember, the NFL, he was gambling, went to Texas Tech and got an injunction to play. And then there was backlash. And so he's backing out and says, I'll just go to the NFL. Well, the NFL, and we saw this coming. If you listen to the show, we suggested this might happen. The NFL stated that there would be no supplemental draft this summer, leaving Brendan Sorsby in limbo for the coming year. Now, under this NFL's collective bargaining agreement with the players union, the league has the right to determine whether or not to hold a supplemental draft. And according to CBS Sports NFL insider Jonathan Jones and also Matt Zenith, the league decided Sorsby's application for the draft and declined that application and decided for the third consecutive year not to stage the event. The NFL sent a letter to Sorsby explaining the decision, citing what it determined were numerous issues with his application for inclusion in a supplemental draft. And here's the quote that we have for you. The issues presented by your petition are too significant and too closely tied to the league's core integrity interest to permit meaningful review within the timeline presented. This is someone who is with the NFL Management Council. The league noted that Sorsby did not provide the complete record of the NCAA's investigation into his gambling habits and that he did not take accountability for his conduct because he sought to avoid the consequences of the NCAA's ineligibility ruling through an injunction hearing and did not express that he would adhere to the NFL's integrity policies. Sorsby will not have a path to the league this offseason. His attorney, Jeffrey Kessler, has made a name for himself in recent months, called the NFL's decision, quote, a violation of the CBA and the law, end quote, and said in a statement to CBS Sports that, quote, we will pursue this immediately with the NFLPA, end quote. Now, again, we've talked about the NFL and their stance on gambling. You can do almost anything and still play. The one thing the NFL has a problem with is gambling. And this is why we said on this show, Brendan Sorsby is not looking big picture on this. And this statement from NFL's lawyers proves that. If you're trying to skirt the NCAA's rules on gambling, why do you think that would pass muster here? And as we predicted last week, it does not. So there's no supplemental draft. You can pursue it if you want. We'll talk more about this, I'm sure, later this week, but I will just quote producer Tony on this much. We were talking in the break. And look, you want to go become a free agent? Okay. We don't see a team trying to sign you right now. Anyway, we'll talk more about that. Brendan Sorsby right now, without a team and with a few million in his pocket from the NIL deal, whatever checks were already cashed before this all happened down at Texas Tech. All right, stay with us. More to come. Sports IQ with Larry Smith. We continue right now with Cole Shelton, writer for Heavy.com, as we're talking a little National Football League. Cole, I don't know about you. This I'm going to throw you just a curveball out of the box. Does it drive you nuts when announcers constantly say National Football League and not just NFL?
One of my biggest pet peeves is if on TV on the guide it says MLB baseball or NFL football, you already have that's one of my biggest things for baseball right now. I'll just say like MLB baseball. So you're saying like Major League Baseball is on it. Yeah. That is one of my biggest pet peeves going, like if you just watch it on TV.
Yeah. And we do that. Like I'm going to the ATM machine. Okay. So yeah, like I said, this is nothing to do with anything. It just happened to, as I'm saying, it came out. Ron Jaworski on Monday Night Football many years ago was the worst at this. He never said NFL. It was, the National Football League, and it's a thing that goes back to the 1970s and the merger, and it's so antiquated. But anyway, I digress. It's me. I'm an old curmudgeon. It's the way it is. Okay, listen, let's get down to some good stuff now. OTAs, so many are out of the way. Teams getting a chance to look at their new players. What do you see so far? And it's a very broad, general question as we get into late June and getting now really about a month away from camps opening.
Yeah, I think like for me, I cover like the Bills and the Browns for Heavy, and like the Bills, I think it's the big question is just like everything with the head coach. Like they all said they needed like a culture change. And then you go in and just hire the offensive coordinator, which I thought was quite weird if you're saying like the playoff failures are part of this culture and like how are you really going to change the culture? But it seems like everyone likes Joe Brady. And like, I just think for him, like, you have such a good quarterback at Josh Allen, but they've just kind of become like a slant and run game offense when he has like one of the best arms. So I think Bills fans want to see Allen kind of throw the ball deep, and like he brought in DJ Moore. We saw what he was able to do with Caleb. So I think that should work for Buffalo. But like, I think the Bills are kind of like the big question is just like, what is Joe Brady's team? And like Jim Leonard coming in, first time defensive coordinator in a Super Bowl window, like, is that going to work? Like, he had success in college. Like, there's tons of questions around Buffalo that I think, and then obviously the new stadium too for all the new fans.
Right. Does it raise the stakes a bit? I think with the new stadium, like you said with Josh, you look, you have a window with these guys, right? I mean, Josh is almost Superman, but again, he only put that cape on for so many years. It would feel like there should be some kind of there maybe it's an urgency to get this done while he's in his prime.
Well, that's what so many Bills fans have been mad at for the past couple of years, is just because you look at like, you have this kind of like top 3 quarterback in the NFL, and just like the weapons that he had since Diggs is gone is just like kind of lackluster. Like, Khalil Shakir has been their number 1 wide receiver, and I bet a lot of NFL fans might not even know who that is. And it's just like, I think a big knock, what a lot of Bills fans complain about, is just Brandon Beane's moves, and he's kind of been saved by drafting Josh Allen. I think that's why he's still there, and like McDermott got fired. Like, that kind of buys you a couple of years if, hey, I was able to pick this guy out instead of the other quarterbacks, and people were saying Josh Rosen was going to be the better guy that for Allen. So like, it is like, I think the more trade, the contract, whatever, it is a lot of money, but especially some people say he's maybe on his decline. But if you still get 1 or 2 good years, I think that's kind of what you need. Like, you kind of have to push the chips all in with Allen. Like, he's only getting older. Like, it's kind of now or never for Buffalo.
Yeah. Stephon Diggs, is there a chance he might come back to the Bills?
It seems so weird because the ending was not good. Like, he was fighting with Allen and the coaches on the sidelines. And then like when they got eliminated for the playoffs, like, he stormed out of the locker room, and that was kind of his goodbye. Like, didn't say anything to the players, like obviously that the media saw. And now it seems like all the players are kind of campaigning. Like, a bunch of them are campaigning. Like, you see Deion Dawkins posting on his social media, telling him to come back to Buffalo. You see like CJ Gardner-Johnson telling him to get back. And it's like, he's even posting some things. Like, I don't really know the fit, because like, I think Diggs is more of a slot guy now, and you have Shakir, you have obviously DJ Moore, you brought in Skylar Bell, who I think looked very good at OTAs as a promising rookie. Like, I think if he's fine not being that number 1 guy, which you don't really know with him, just because how kind of crazy it got, and like to the diva those wide receivers are, like, if he's fine not being number 1, he's fine being like a 2 or 3, I think it could work, but I probably don't see him coming back.
Okay. You talked about Bean. Should he have also been jettisoned if you really want to do a complete reboot and spark this team?
I was in the camp. I think they both had to go. I know McDermott is like a great coach, but I just think it's like kind of one of those things, like, how many tries do you get? Like, if you can't get over the hump, like, I know like the big thought was, well, are you going to get someone better? But like, how do you know you won't? If like, is just losing in the AFC divisional or the AFC championship game year after year, like, good enough? Like, for some, maybe it is. I always thought that with Allen, like, it is kind of Super Bowl or bust every year for them. So I thought kind of change it up, get rid of both of them. And then you look at like what Bean has done really outside of Allen, like, their defense is always a liability. They can't stop the run, and then come the playoffs, that's kind of the big issue for them. Like, I was kind of surprised to see him stay, but he made some good moves this offseason. It'll be interesting to see, like, if they don't get to at least reach the Super Bowl, like, how short that leash is on Bean, and maybe this could be his last year too.
Yeah, and not to continue too much with Buffalo, but one more. Does this team have enough defense to make a title run this year? We talked so much about Josh and his offensive weapons, but what do they have defensively, and where are they right now?
I still have questions about the run defense, like, and just the problem with Buffalo is they've never been able to get after the quarterback. Like, they went out and signed Von Miller to that big deal. That first year was good. Then he obviously tore his ACL. Like, you're paying Greg Rousseau a lot of money. He's kind of been hit and miss. They've been drafting tons of guys, and just like Bean hasn't been hitting on them. Like, they drafted TJ Parker in the 2nd round. We'll see what that does. The Bradley Chubb signing to me was really interesting. That's a guy that, similar to Von Miller, when healthy, he's one of the top guys, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy, so it's a big risk. Like, their secondary, I think, is really good. I think Cole Bishop is a young safety. I think he's going to be very good. I like their cornerback room with Benford and Maxwell Harrison. I just think it's like the linebackers and like that defensive line that kind of gives me some pause, and if they can continue to stop the run or not.
Yeah, fun year though with Buffalo, the new stadium. I remember I've got so many friends from Buffalo and Bills fans talking about, look, this was really back in the day, it was like a minor league stadium. They just kind of built, stands around it. So they actually kind of, for the first time have a true major league stadium that will be on par with other cathedrals around the country. And I think that's exciting. And of course it's open air, which means the cold still comes into play. Not a big cold weather fan for myself, but hey, you know what? Good for the Bills. Okay, Cleveland Browns. Speaking of resets, it's another reset there by the lake. Give me reason to be optimistic about this Browns team. Obviously making the big move, sending Myles Garrett out to the Rams. They came out and said, hey, look, we wouldn't have done this without getting Jared Verse in return. Why should Browns fans be excited about 2026?
I think the optimism for Browns fans is watching Arch Manning or Dante Moore and seeing which one Cleveland will probably draft. I think it's going to be a bad year. I think the problem with Cleveland is I think they're going to go with Deshaun Watson as a starter, and I don't really love that because I think Deshaun Watson is good enough to get you like 7 wins, and then that's not getting you that top guy. Like, to me, I think you just go with Shador the full year, see what he has. Maybe he ends up being good. You don't have to draft that quarterback this year. Like, I know they paid Watson all that money and traded. It was a big trade, hasn't worked out. But like, I just think at this point, like, you kind of need to find your franchise guy, and just going with Watson and just walk your own free agency, I don't think makes a lot of sense. So I just think like they have some young players, like the wide receivers, Conception and Denzel Boston, I think are nice picks to kind of build that wide receiver room. I like their defense. I think Verse will fit in very well there, but like, I just think it's going to be another probably bad year for Cleveland until you kind of land that franchise guy.
So they'll be competitive, just enough to be competitive, but look for a 4-13 season. You wouldn't be surprised if they come up with only 4 wins.
Yeah, I think you're like in the 4 to 6 range for Cleveland probably again this year.
Fair enough. What's another team that you're kind of watching to possibly to make a move and maybe make some noise here this fall?
One team that I think is like kind of in their win now window, which surprised me last year, was the Bears. I was really impressed with the Bears. I think like if you have a quarterback on a rookie contract, I think it's time to go all in. Like the contracts only get bigger. So like I know their division's tough. Like I expect the Lions to be a lot better than what they were last year. Who knows with Minnesota with their quarterback situation? But like for me, like I think the Bears, if they get up to a hot start, like I think they're a team that go get aggressive before the deadline and get some more weapons, or not even like just anything defense, offense, because I think they're like with a rookie quarterback, Williams kind of took that next step. I think they could kind of be a team to watch out for.
Yeah, we've talked before on the show about how important it is to have that to be able to get a quarterback on a discount, right? I mean, at one point last year, the Colts with Daniel Jones, obviously the Bears with Williams, Drake May with New England. Turns out the Seahawks. And what they did with Darnold. I mean, if you can win and not have to spend $50 million on that on your QB1, that's huge, because what that means is that you can get more players, better players around you. And speaking of Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes, they redo his deal again. The first contract that's north of $500 million. Can they put enough pieces around him to make one last run? Speaking of making the most of a player while he's on top.
I think Kansas City's going to be good again next year. I think Mahomes is going to play week 1. I think he's going to be back. And like, I just think with Mahomes, you can't count him out. Like, I know like their weapons are kind of like Kelsey and didn't look as good last year. He's like getting a year older, but there's also the question mark around Rashee Rice and his kind of legal battle. But Xavier Worthy should be healthy. I think he adds like a dynamic, like, and then just that whole division. Like, I don't think the Raiders are going to be that good. Denver's obviously really good with the defense, but who knows with Bo Nix and his injury coming back. But like, I kind of think Kansas City will be right back in there again.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to count. I mean, Mahomes he's like a Brady, he's like a Manning. He just wins. He just plays at a higher level. So I agree that let's face it, even 2 years ago, how much of that was Mahomes, right? I mean, until they got they faced the Eagles in the Super Bowl, they were down in so many games, and yet he found a way to bring them back, and they would make big plays on defense, and things happened for them. Out on the West Coast, the LA Rams obviously going all in, bringing in Myles Garrett, Matthew Stafford. It's his last season. it's something that I think something should be said when a team knows going into camp that this is the year. That the 2027 is going to look much different for this team, and they're going all in. Do you like the moves they made? They were a double-digit win team last year, and made a run in the playoffs, and now here they are again.
Yeah, I think the Rams, I think that's kind of what you have to do. Your window's kind of closing, at least with this kind of current group. You draft Ty Simpson, you don't know what he's going to be, but with Stafford last year, I think draft picks really don't matter a ton. It is kind of Super Bowl or bust. We saw that a couple of years ago when they won the Super Bowl. All the trades they did, they brought in Von Miller and for the defense, but and then all the talk is Aaron Donald's kind of hinting at coming out of retirement later on in the season.
Right.
If you get him back, that just makes your defense even scarier and that much better with him and Garrett on a defensive line. I like what LA's doing. Their division's super tough. I think it's probably the toughest with San Fran and Seattle, who I both expect to be double-digit win teams and playoff caliber teams. That's always tough. You got to play them 4 times, and you're probably going to meet at least one of them again in the playoffs. So it is kind of a tough route, but I like what the Rams are doing. They kind of know it's Super Bowl or bust this last year with Stafford.
Yeah, it's exciting to see that what they're doing out there. And Matthew Stafford, what a great story. If he can win a second ring and go out on top, that would be pretty impressive as well. You mentioned Seattle, the Seahawks. Obviously, a change at running back as they kind of again move things around and make things work financially. Can they make a run at repeating, which we rarely see in any sport, especially in the NFL?
Yeah, I just think it's so hard. Their defense is still going to be really good. They I still even though Darnold won the Super Bowl, there's still all those question marks even around him, just kind of from his years past. So I think are unfair, but then it is a point where you see moments last year where he made some mental mistakes. I think Seattle's starting to be good. I think the Rams are kind of the team to beat in that division and in the NFC, but their defense, if Darnold could play as he did last year, they can go on another deep run.
Yeah. It's going to be so much fun to watch. Well, listen, great to talk with you and get your insights here on the show. Give me, while we're at it, it's late June. Look into your crystal ball. Who are you picking at this moment as your champion in the Super Bowl? Who's going to win it all?
I know it's chalk. I think it's hard to go against the Rams right now. Just kind of what they see. I just feel how good their offense is, and then adding Garrett, I think is going to be good. I actually think the Chiefs, I know they're 8th or 7th on the odds. I just think you can never really count out Mahomes. If you wanted a bit of a longer shot, I just think you never know with Mahomes. I just learned can't count that guy out, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go on another run. And the AFC is kind of wide open. I don't think there's an elite, a true top team in the AFC that is theirs to win.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we will leave it there. Well, you mentioned Rams earlier. We'll make sure to give you a shot, and you gave us your teams, Rams, Chiefs, in the Super Bowl. So there you go. We'll see. We'll mark your progress and see how you did in June. Hey, Cole, always good to talk to you, man. Have a great week. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, appreciate it. Cole Shelton, once again, he's a writer for Heavy.com. Great to get his insights there in the NFL, and we won't hold him to it, but it's always fun to have those conversations. Rams, Chiefs, can't argue with that. All right, more Sports IQ coming up.
Listen, were you forced into getting a solar contract and now you just don't want it anymore? Maybe the solar company misled you. Or is your solar contract buried with hidden fees? Are you not saving the amount of money you thought you would on your energy costs? Don't worry. At the Solar Exit Hotline, we can help you cancel your solar contract, even if the panels are already installed. Our experienced legal team will review your contract and help you cancel it, possibly saving you thousands of dollars. You gotta call right now for complete details. So listen, if you're not happy with your solar contract for any reason, we are here to help you cancel it. Call the Solar Exit Hotline now for immediate options to help you exit your solar contract. This call is 100% free. Call 855-227-0286. That's 855-227-0286. Call us right now.
And we continue here. Producer Tony has got his microphone on. Tony, round one of the NBA draft. I thought it was well produced. ESPN did a nice job with that overall. But overall, also kind of really not a lot of surprises right there. The top players in the lottery pretty much, for the most part, went to the teams we thought they were going to be going to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the first five went pretty much the way everybody's mock draft had it for the last 2 months. You know, there was some intrigue as to whether were the Wizards going to take Debanza, were they switching to Peterson at the last minute, but they held with Debanza, which is a good, solid pick for them. They're hopefully putting something together. Again, the only problem I have with the Wizards was bringing Trae Young back for the amount of money they gave him. Yeah. Like, what were you thinking with that? But the draft, I think they did pretty well with that pick. And there were a couple other teams that did really well. A couple of other teams, the head scratchers were a little few, and one player you had to feel a little sorry for coming in. And, like Koa Pete, I was really felt bad that he didn't get taken. I'm glad he got taken in the first round, that he didn't drop all the way out. He's going to get traded from Dallas. Whenever these deals can be announced, he's going to go to Phoenix via the Knicks. Probably a good place for him. He played his college ball at Arizona. I'm not sure how his game is going to translate after seeing some of the workout film, but hopefully it does. But there were some teams that did some good things and some teams that, left just scratching your head going, who's in charge here?
Right, exactly. I thought Adai Mara was going to Oklahoma City was interesting. 7'3". I saw somewhere he's got a standing reach of 9 feet 9 inches. Obviously, Oklahoma City getting ready to face the Spurs and Victor Wembanyama, the 7'4" phenom for the next decade. They add some height now to go against one of the more unique players in the NBA, and they're going to probably see them over the next several years in the playoffs.
Yeah, I love that move. I mean, if you're going to take on Wembanyama, you need a bunch of fouls to give. It also kind of opens up the question, is there a possibility that they're getting ready to move on from Chet Holmgren? They keep saying no, but we all know that, the more a team doth protest, the more something's happening behind the scenes. So, and if they do, it still gives them Hartenstein. It would give them Mara, would give them two bodies. I'm sure they're going to, if they did trade him, Chet, they would ask for a big in return somehow. And I kind of like them getting Bennett Sturtz, is another guy who can shoot the three ball for them. And they seem to always find guys who can shoot the three. Like you said, they have this way of, you're kind of coming up on the end of that first contract. You're going to make a lot of money. Okay, we're going to have to let you go. But we got Bennett Sturtz, who can take your spot and shoot the three ball just the way you shoot it. So I give them credit. I think they did a really good job. And I also like, the fact that the Hawks went out and picked up Ebi Okafor from St. John's. I like Okafor, like Zube Ejiofor. I think he's a big. He can help them out underneath. I just like the fact that the kid plays hard all the time. Yeah, that's always a good pickup, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And with Oklahoma City, you're right that they just, once again, they've got those pieces there where not only can you, trade somebody who's about to come up on a massive contract, but that's another asset. You can get something back in return if you need to. I mean, and Sturtz, I tell you what, watching him, I watched several Iowa games late in the season in the NCAA tournament. He can just flat out score. I mean, it's unbelievable what he's done to come from Division II to the status and now a first round pick. Is if it weren't for Keaton Wagler, it'd be one of the great stories in this draft.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was a great move. I also like, Larry, the fact that San Antonio's picking up Terrace Reed. There's going to be a trade announced with Denver, blah, blah, blah. It still hasn't, gone through. But I think that's a really good, because, again, it's another big for them to help out with Wemby. It gives him somebody else that can play next to him that's a little bit stronger, a little more physical, maybe a little more talented than a Luke Cornett is, on that interior. So I think that was a really good pickup.
Yeah, more picks tonight in round 2 as we wrap it up for here. We appreciate our guests stopping by, Stefan Krajisnik, Cole Shelton. Appreciate you as well. Make this a great Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow here on the Sports IQ.
Thanks for listening to Sports IQ with Larry Smith, Monday through Friday. Continue the conversation at Sports IQ LS. We'll see you next time.